Hi, my name is Gary Stewart, and I am the founder and CEO of Founder Tribes, a mobile app that provides founders across the world with access to the feedback, networks, and capital that they need to start up and scale up their businesses, all from their mobile phones. We exist to empower entrepreneurs of all races, genders, geographies, religions, sexual orientations, and all other such considerations, because we understand that while talent is distributed equally, opportunity is not. And we are here to change that, which is why I am so excited to welcome this panel with the true unicorns, the Black and Brown founders who have raised more than $1 million. This is one of our most important panels because Black people only receive 1% of VC funding in the US, despite being 14% of the population. And Blacks receive 0.24% in the UK, despite being 4 to 5% of the population. Likewise, until very recently, there were only 7 Black people in the top 100 VC firms in the US with any decision making authority. And I suspect that the numbers are even worse in the UK and Europe. This is why we are so lucky to have this panel be moderated by the brilliant duo of Emma Albanier, a serial entrepreneur with a successful exit, who I was lucky enough to invest in while I was at Wyra, and now work with at Capital Enterprises' One Tech program. And we also have as our other moderator, Kenneth Eby, a fellow Yale Law School grad who also went to Harvard undergraduate, and he's now leading New York City's effort to support Black entrepreneurs via an initiative called Black Entrepreneurs New York City, or BNYC. But before I pass it back over to Emma and to Kenneth, I'd like to give you a peek of our Founder Tribes app, which you can already find on the app stores, both Android and iOS.
We live in a world where more than 500 million entrepreneurs will never get access to the feedback, networks, and capital they may need to realize their dreams. Talent is distributed evenly, but opportunity isn't. Founder Tribes exist to change that. Our mobile app can be accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. It all begins with a founder submitting a pitch that will be evaluated by a community of entrepreneurs and investors relevant to their vertical and stage. Through the app, each founder gets qualified feedback about which areas of their business might need improvement, in the form of how many people swiped right or left, and in the form of ratings on each key element of a business plan based on Sequoia Capital's evaluation system. Each founder is then offered a personalized selection of video tips from world-class founders who explain how they've overcome similar challenges. Our professors are truly world-class and include such names as Stacey Abrams, Steve Blank, Jen Wong, and Anne Wojcicki. If a founder wants more support, she can access our curated database of coaches and mentors and set up one-to-ones, all via the app. Each founder iterates her pitch until the community of entrepreneurs and investors say that she is investment worthy. We'll then introduce her to relevant funders appropriate to her stage and vertical, including venture capital, angels, and alternative finance. We already have paying customers, including Capital Enterprise. And our investors include American unicorn founders such as Sander Daniels, founder of Thumbtack, which has raised $436 million from Sequoia Capital and Google, Zach Bookman, founder of OpenGov, who has raised $140 million from investors including Andreessen Horowitz, executives like Jamie Broderick, who is the former head of wealth management at UBS UK and Jersey, and Dana Wagner, who is currently the chief legal officer at Impossible Foods, which has raised $1.4 billion from investors like Serena Williams, Katy Perry, and Jay-Z. We are leveling the playing field for entrepreneurial talent. So download the app, accelerate your business, and empower yourself.
And now, without much further ado, Emma will introduce our amazing panel of speakers who will answer the question, how do you raise more than $1 million when you're Black or brown?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Gary, for that awesome introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's panel on how to raise $1 million while black or brown. On this panel, we'll be taking a deep dive into the experiences, challenges, and solutions of people who've literally been there and done that. My name's Emma Obanye, and I have the pleasure of co-moderating this panel with the wonderful Kenneth Ebby. Kenneth?
Thank you so much. It is an honor to co-moderate this panel with you, Emma. And I think for those who do not yet know you, it's important to say a few words just to let them know who you are and why you are the perfect lead for this conversation. Emma Joy Obanye is an entrepreneur, advisor, mentor, and tech geek from Hackney, and has spent the last 15 years building products and leading teams in tech for both corporates and startups. On a mission to increase diversity and inclusion within the London tech startup ecosystem, Emma leads on entrepreneur-facing activities of Capital Enterprises One Tech Initiative as Director of Platform and Community, as well as an advisory group member of Lambeth Council's mission to support diverse talent and open up the creative workplace through Elevate. As an entrepreneur herself, Emma does this while splitting her time between her ventures, Mindful Team, a tech platform to measure and improve the health and culture of teams, and the retrospective game, card games for teams. Emma previously co-founded and exited the award-winning music-focused loyalty and influencer platform, Buddy Bounce. And she was recognized by the Inclusive Boards and Financial Times as one of the UK's top 100 Black and minority ethnic leaders in 2019. Madam Moderator, it is in fact an honor, and I'm excited to co-moderate this important discussion with you.
No, Kenneth, thanks so much for that for that intro. But literally, I get imposter syndrome reading your CV. As well as obviously all of the work that you're doing to actually further the New York ecosystem. For those of you that don't know Ken, Ken has previously served as the Deputy General Counsel and Director of External Affairs at the New York City Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. He was the campaign manager for the first Black man to serve as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of Brooklyn, New York. And he has a bachelor's from Harvard and a doctorate from Yale. So I think we're in really good hands with you as well, Kenneth. And yeah, literally you are driving the ecosystem in New York. So if we kind of start thinking about today's panel, the fact of the matter is, as Gary kind of stated with some of those stats earlier, that the stats around Black founders raising venture capital are frankly abysmal. Those stats, whether it's around, female entrepreneurship, with females in the UK, for example, only raising 0.24% of investment over the last 10 years. Or I think I spoke to Keisha the other day and she told me that only 34 Black people have actually raised more than $1 million in the US. The stats may feel negative, but they're really important. They're really, really important. And as you say that, we can't change what you can't measure. And so we're lucky to have organizations like Extend Ventures doing the research, doing the work to actually uncover all of this data. But look, we're at a point now where we need to go beyond this, what I like to call self-actualization, and into action mode. So what really excites me about today's panel is that we're not just discussing those stats and the challenges, but also the journeys, insights, and solutions of some exceptional Black and brown founders who've raised between them $1 million and $171 million each. So without further ado, let's get to know the panelists. So let's just start by going around with each of you one by one, and if you can just do a short intro to yourselves and your businesses. So let's start with Dr. Precious Lunga.
Hi, really glad to be here and excited to be in the company. Honored, Emma and Kenneth. I run a company. I'm a founder and CEO of a company called Baobab Circle. And why we set it up was because people with chronic health conditions have a problem in that if you're living with that condition, in between doctor's visits, life gets in the way and there's no data. And we realized that we can actually track and use algorithms to automate some of the support that's needed and have better outcomes. And that's why I set this up. And we're in several countries across Africa, and we've reached tens of thousands of people with our life-saving services.
Amazing work that you do, Dr. Precious. Thank you. Next, let's go to Keisha Crosby.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks for hosting the panel. I want to thank Gary and Wendy for having us here today. It's a real great opportunity and a needed talk. I'm Keisha Crosby, founder and CEO of TriGuard Risk Solutions, where we develop a software that can secure other software, mobile apps, and web apps. We're currently funded by the government via SBIRs, but we're hoping to get funding to go commercially as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Fantastic. So next, Anish.
Thanks, Emma and Keith, for inviting me here. My name is Anish Takar, and I founded Greenlight Planet. There's about 600 million people in about 40 countries in Africa that live off of the grid, and many of them spend like 40 or 50 cents a day on kerosene and phone charging fees. And Greenlight Planet installs and finances rooftop solar systems for off-grid houses. So rather than spending that 40 or 50 cents a day on kerosene, homes spend that 40 or 50 cents a day to pay off solar equipment. And then once they pay it off, we have a credit history and we extend financing for upgrades and appliances with the idea that homes can self-finance their own power and the appliances they want and reach grid power on their own. We have about 1,200 employees and raised about $150 million to date. Thanks.
Brilliant. Such important work. So next up, Rich.
Hey guys, really glad to be here. My name is Rich Surengeorgi. I'm the CEO and founder of Business Score. We're now officially the UK's #1 marketplace for e-commerce businesses trying to access funding to help them grow. We're backed by Local Globe, our lead investor, who are the leading seed fund here in Europe. And before this, I used to be a management consultant at McKinsey here in London, where I focused on serving public sector and financial sector leaders.
Amazing. Thanks for that. Ez, you're next.
Hi, everyone. Great to be with you today. So I'm Ez, or Azechi Britton. I'm one of the founding members, principal and CTO in residence for ImpactX Capital. We're a venture capital fund. We're building a £100 million fund to support and invest in underrepresented and diverse entrepreneurs across the UK and Europe. I'm also co-founder of Code Untapped, which is a digital skills accelerator. We showcase, upskill, and place diverse technology talent into great organizations in the UK.
Brilliant, Ez. I love the fact that you've actually been a founder, now you're an investor, so actually occupied both sides of the table. And another person who's done that as well is Piers. You're up next.
Hi, I'm Piers Linney. I'm a background entrepreneur and investor. My background is in venture capital law and investment banking, hedge funds as well. My career has mainly been in business, technology, some media, telecommunications. I'm still an entrepreneur. I've just started a 3D printed mountain bike business. We raised £1.5 million, crowdfunded that last year. I'm also on the board of the British Business Bank, which is the UK government bank. We've invested 80 billion, we're up to now, the last 18 months or 12 months into UK small and high growth businesses. So if you're US, it's equivalent to the Paycheck Protection Plan. It's gone into businesses. And I'm also a former trustee of one of the UK's largest innovation foundations.
Brilliant. Thank you, Piers. And last but not least, Ikechi, off the back of your Series B raise.
Hi, everyone. Ikechi, CEO of Migo. We enable companies to offer credit to consumer and small business customers in emerging markets. There is about a $1.8 trillion funding gap for people to have access to credit. And we use machine learning to assess the credit worthiness of customers and can extend credit to customers that are not part of traditional credit and banking systems, and in particular lower income clients. So in short, we enable lower income populations in emerging markets to get access to financial capital.
Brilliant. Thank you, Akechi. So I'm going to now start with some questions, really kind of focus on the problem and challenges, and then I'll hand off to Ken, who's going to focus on some of the solutions. So ladies, I want to start with you. Many Black women reading the stats or listening to the stats around raising investment that Gary kind of hit on earlier might be forgiven for being put off by the large sums of investment, by actually raising large sums of investment for their businesses. But you both not only managed to do it, but raised more than $1 million for your startups. Precious, I'd like to start with you. You've had to overcome the barrier of not actually being from the tech world. What was the process like of raising for you, given that you built your initial credibility within medicine or the world of medicine?
Well, before I set this up, I actually set up a health business unit within a telco. So I had built sort of tech products because I realized I needed a step from being in the field and epidemiologist. But one of the challenges that I experienced were people would ask me, for example, whether I really understood numbers, because so there's the intersectionality of being a woman and also being a Black woman. They would ask me about numbers, and then I'd have to explain that actually epidemiology is it's all about numbers and modeling, and actually you do some coding in there to build your statistical models. What was really sort of key was to quickly go past that. So I learned that as soon as I got in the room, I'd say, "Hi, my name is Precious. I'm an epidemiologist. I have a doctorate from Cambridge University." So you had to get in all those, you had to get that information in really quickly, because that would give people pause and say, okay, right, we know what epidemiology is, okay, reputable university. And then the next step was being able to debunk some of those misconceptions. So going into the numbers again almost immediately. So what I found though was that there would be some who would be receptive to that and some who wouldn't. But because I'm a numbers person, it's all about probabilities. So I looked at the figures and I thought, okay, right, it's low. So it means I just have to have multiple touch points. So I have to meet as many of these sort of VCs as possible and identify how to meet them. So through either introductions, through networks, or either cold. So initially it was cold, so cold contacts. And when I met, it would be just testing out and just really being bold. And also, most importantly, understanding that they were coming from their point of view. And so when someone was discouraging, to not be discouraged by it, I think learning to realize whose advice you'll take and whose advice you're going to, shrug and discard is really critical.
Brilliant. No, thank you. And so you took it or treated it like a numbers game. And speaking of numbers, Keisha, I'm going to move over to you now. I believe that you were the first ever Black recipient of the SBIR. And for those of you that don't know what that is, that's a Small Business Innovation Research Grant, and that's in nearly 40 years. So firstly, congrats, and secondly, what the hell, right? So as a trailblazer, not being put off by those stats, how did you do it?
Actually, the first Black. No, I'm not.
No, you're fine. You're fine now. Yeah.
Okay. I'm actually the first Black woman to win an SBIR from DOE, which is Department of Energy, and the Department of Navy. There have been other Black women to win, but it's 0.08% out of the whole 40 years. And I'm the first in those two agencies. Mm. So how do you raise a trail? You got to make one, because all the time you hear there's a glass ceiling for women. Well, for Black women, it's plexiglass. We constantly go up and bounce off. So I didn't stop. I just put myself to the grindstone and just made it happen until I did it, because I pitched 100 times to investors and I got no funding. So I went the government route, which is the American Seed Fund.
And in fact, did you, as Precious was saying, did you have to kind of start with your credibility or with those kind of elements of your, to actually break through?
Yeah, to break through from a government research standpoint, it was easier because, I have a mathematics degree, I have an engineering degree. So those qualifications weren't needed. It was just, can I do it? How many papers did I write? What's my traction? I actually wrote some of NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology. I was the first to publish the software assurance controls that NIST published in 2016. I got my patent in 2016. All these things I got to become credible still wasn't enough. I was going to pitches and they were saying, you need to get some white guy to be your CEO. And I said, no, I don't.
Wow. It's not the first time I've heard that. I've heard that a few times. But thank you for that, Keisha. And on the topic of credibility, credential investing is a hot topic, right? And it's an excuse that is given many a time about the number of, or the low numbers of Black entrepreneurs that are raising investment. So Anish, like, you've been going for 12 years, you've had multiple funding rounds. Like you said before, you have 1,200 employees. You've been profitable for the last 4 years. And in a space, impact investment that's largely seen as kind of patient capital, right? So does it get easier? Do the challenges disappear as you go through the various rounds and as your business and you become more successful?
It definitely starts harder. The first 8 years for us, we had such a hard time raising any amount of sizable amount of funding, and it meant really early on we were operating on a very shoestring budget, and we had to get very financially disciplined very early because we couldn't raise the cash. In the end, it kind of worked out for us. We built a very disciplined company, and through it we saw competitors come out that kind of fit a certain mold and come out of like the Silicon Valley, Stanford type of place, and raise a lot of money without having any much traction on the ground, and comparably lower numbers, smaller numbers, and so it hurts to see, where results aren't what confers credibility, but something else does. And but in the end, we reached profitability 4 years ago. A lot of our competitors have just sort of burned through a lot of cash and not gotten where we are. And we've been, over the last 3 or 4 years, because of becoming profitable, we've been able to grow much faster. So now we have 2 million clients, and we add 100,000 clients every month. We're in 4 countries in East and West Africa. And so the credibility now is showing up and helping open up some doors. But even we're raising our Series D right now, and we have an investment banker, and they wanted to introduce us to a U.S. fund. Okay, they said the fund is really interested in businesses in the developing world, and but we want to make sure we show a Western face of management. So can we're 1,200 employees in East Africa, Nigeria, India, China, and they say can your CFO just not be on the call and can your white co-founder join the call? So I said,
wow.
That's fine, and let's spend some time and get him comfortable with the pitch. And they said, no, he doesn't need to pitch. He just needs to be on the video call and just say hello, and then you do it. But we just want to show that Western face of management. So I think as you start to build like real results, this stuff fades away, but it still finds its way of showing up.
Wow. No, thanks for that honesty and transparency on that, Anish. Ikechi, to you, like, you've just raised your Series B. Is there anything to add to that point? Do you feel the same?
I suppose I have a slightly maybe contrarian view. I mean, and I took a traditional path. My co-founder is also Nigerian. But we lived in Silicon Valley. Came from engineering and worked at. We took the very traditional. He was at Stanford. I came from Amazon, so we took the very traditional path. America is. I'm currently in Brazil, but America is one of the most racist countries in the world. However, I can't say that I've ever I've ever encountered an investor discussion where I felt that my skin color was an issue. So in my particular case, I didn't have sort of the experience that was just described by Anish. And, it is, investors make decisions based on comfort level and their perception of risk, and it's an emotional decision. And so it's not a scientific decision. And I think my goal, maybe as a Nigerian immigrant in the US, is to focus on getting an outcome. And some of the reasons why the outcome happens or doesn't happen, I really don't focus on. So that's my particular experience is, focused on outcome.
Fantastic, thank you. Rich, over to you. You went through YC. Was the reason that you decided to apply anything to do with credibility? And why did you decide to do that? And what did that do for you once you'd actually returned to the UK?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so I guess the challenge I had firstly is that early on in life, even from young, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So for me, first of all, was the realization, seeing, legends, people like Ezechi, seeing others on TV, UK people like Piers, is like, I just knew how ridiculous it was. And Ezechi, for example, been a long idol of mine. In fact, he was actually one of the reasons I kind of said to my co-founder, we can do it, because there's actually a couple of other Black people doing it ahead of us. And so what else I was making, but what I realized is it is all about credibility, right? And, I think me from a very young age, I realized that, and for various experiences. So I went and played the game. So the first thing I did, I made sure I went and got mentors. And I think one of the tactical things you have to do, you have to realize you need white allies, basically. This is just the reality. Whichever system you're in, you need allies who are on the other side who can help you. So when I was even at, so one thing is, who's going to be great, right? Because you can see signals. So one thing I did is when Monzo was super early on. Well, first of all, I decided to go work for McKinsey. I had to play the Hunger Games to get there. I went to London School of Economics, and every year from undergraduate and masters, one person gets to McKinsey London. And I realized, shit, that's going to have to be me if I want to be an entrepreneur in my 20s. So I went and did that.
Wow.
That's what you have to do, right? But then I also knew that, in life, be kind to people because it will pay back eventually. And you try to be helpful. And so I remember I did a gap year, or like a bit of time before McKinsey. And I actually just messaged Tom at Monzo and said, hey, by the way, I'm going to be an entrepreneur in a few years. Let me know if I can help you. And because I knew that he wanted to get to McKinsey, wasn't actually good enough. He didn't make it. But, where we have to compete, we always have to be much, much better, even if he's actually a very bright guy. So when I went to McKinsey, I used to send him all his candidates. Because he was struggling to hire, before Monzo was famous. So I sent candidates. His first McKinsey candidates came from me, sending people from McKinsey to go see him. I invited him to the office. And what I did when I was at McKinsey, I used that. So I used to bring in all my contacts, CEOs of banks to come and talk at McKinsey. We were also lucky that I just did a lot of shit. I mean, I even before I even went to McKinsey, I did a big summit and I introduced the mayor of London, or the next mayor of London, to Vivian, who was the head of McKinsey. So that's how she met him at my event, and I invited her both. And so what it meant is that all these people knew of me when I was younger, and it's like, I kind of reached out to people so they know that 5 years later, now I'm like, by the way, I'm here now. Can you send this message to this investor? But that's still not enough, right? Unfortunately. So I knew basically investors are racist, unfortunately. And part of it is because they haven't seen many Black people exit, So it's like when some of us make an exit, like the Candy guy in America, and has money and can reinvest in, like, oh, actually, just because you got dark skin, you can actually do this. That's basically what it is. And we also need people who've exited to have their own money to be the angel investors. And so for me, then it was like, and coming on to the actual story of how I fundraised, I'm not a developer, which is a problem. One mistake I made, I went to London School of Economics, has no engineers, only people who kind of want to work in investment banks. That was one mistake. And so I didn't know any engineers. So I knew I was going to be, fundraising off an idea. I went to every single pitch competition in London, won every single one. I became the guy just going to pitch competitions and winning for fun. I even met Ezechi at one and asked him to invest. I don't want to tell you what his answer was at the time. Don't worry about that. But, I knew that he was going to invest in me. That's the thing. I knew he was going to invest in me one day. But I didn't want to say it to him in that moment. I wasn't given the option when I was still there. But this is just the reality, unfortunately, right? So anyway, and then I applied to YC off an idea. You have to learn how to maneuver it. We actually got into YC with an idea, didn't have a team. But then what I did is I then used it as leverage to then go get my investment in the UK. But what I had done as well is that I'd kind of told the top investor in the UK, nice to meet you. I'm going to get in touch with you soon. Got my offer to go to YC, then said, FYI, I'm back now. I've got my offer to go to America. And then I said, let's talk. And guess what? The next day I was in the meeting with the founder of that venture capital firm. And I said to him, this is what I'm going to go do. You should give me money. Then, you kind of use that to kind of do what you want. Then I went to America anyway, because I knew that's, you can't trust these guys. I went to America. And, what I always do, I also ask my idols. So one of my idols, I have to admit, is Tommy Monzo. Ask him, who's the smartest person you know? Who should I be reading about? And he told me this guy called Paul Graham. And I didn't even know who Paul Graham was. I also went to one of the smartest guys in the UK, a guy called Matt Clifford, who founded EF. Who's the smartest person? They all said the same guy called Paul Graham. So guess what? I'm like, I'm going to get money from this Paul Graham guy. And so he went to YC. Paul Graham, the problem with Paul Graham, he only invested in like 5 companies a batch. But I was like, he's going to invest into us. And I'd already obviously been emailing him for like 3 years before, telling him I'm going to come get money from you. So he's on that cap table as well. But you know what? We're in a good place now. We managed to fundraise, but it's like, it's the Hunger Games squared. Do you know what I mean? This is how you fundraise $1 million as a black guy. It's the Hunger Games squared. Like, it is unbelievable. And the maddest thing is, the people you think are going to back you will still come and spite you, and will still come and cut you down, try to snuff you out. And that's the maddest thing. Did you get me?
Wow.
And like, I can't even go into the madness, but it's like, this is the Hunger Games squared. And yesterday, I'm lucky enough with the best funded. I mean, the mad thing about the racism, right? I can be in America and have meetings in a meeting with Max Levchin, the co-founder of PayPal. He doesn't interrupt me. I'm in the UK with people who've never fucking built a business, investors, yeah? And I'm like, bruv, like, why ask me stupid questions for? Do you understand? I'm like, co-founder of PayPal doesn't interrupt me when we're talking. He listens to me off an idea. I don't have a business. I can't even code off an idea. And he's there listening to me saying, you know what? You're onto something, but, keep me in touch, right? And I come back to the UK. These guys are asking me, what were you doing at McKinsey? I'm like, for fuck's seriously?
Rich,
do you understand? I could go on here, but you know what? Yeah, like, the good thing is I'm in my 20s. I'm, a bit naive. I haven't been as like traumatized as some of the people whose shoulders the giants I'm really standing on, which are the other people in this panel. It's getting easier, but it's still the Hunger Games squared.
Do you know what, Rich? I love that. I love the passion. But
Sorry.
I love the strategic. I love the strategic and the tactical way that you've approached it. And it's unfortunate, but it's almost like black and brown founders have to kind of find those ways to actually.
No worries. But it gets me so angry how ridiculous it is. We need to change it.
Yeah, no, 100%. So thank you for that, Rich. I'd like to now switch to just very quickly to the perspective of Ez and peers who both have occupied both sides of the table. So to you, Ez, first of all, did you invest? No, I'm joking. But as someone who's sat on both sides of the table, what have you got to say to VCs and investors that state that the issue is a pipeline one? Is this math? Is this a myth, or is it a fact, or what?
So firstly, yes, we did. So I will tell you that. Yes, we did. On the myth, it's one of those questions that keeps going up, and you hear it from so many different funds. There's a pipeline problem. There's a pipeline problem. You don't have entrepreneurs of color. You don't have black entrepreneurs in the UK that are doing X, Y, Z, right? You don't have entrepreneurs in the UK from diverse backgrounds who are building venture-backable businesses. So what some of you might not realize, because I didn't mention it in my intro, is that prior to ImpactX and Code Untapped, I co-founded a company called Neighbor, which was a multi-award-winning financial services company providing employment financial access to financial services in the UK. So salary deducted lending. And we raised over £200 million. We lent out over 170 million to UK-based employees. We were Goldman Sachs's largest UK fintech investment to date. At that point, they put about 100 million into us. And yet I hear the conversation that there are no backable businesses in the UK being founded by entrepreneurs of color. Well, one of the things we decided at ImpactX, and to be clear, we have done about 18 investments. We've funded about, I think it's somewhere along the region of 15 Black founders so far across 13 different organizations. And we haven't closed our fund. We've only just got started. This in the last 2 years. If I want to look at the data, one of the things we've been very particular about is that we're data driven. We've built a pipeline process. Everyone can apply to us through that. So you don't require a warm intro to speak to ImpactX Capital. You can come through our website. You can come through our intake form. And I have the data, right? I can tell you now, I have 994 companies in my pipeline in the last 2 years alone. I have over £1 billion worth of fundraising demand in that pipeline. I can tell you for a fact that 444 of those founders are of Black origin, over 300 are female, right? This is just some of the data that we have that is quantified. Yes, there are some companies in there that, we didn't collect the data on at the early stage, so that's why the numbers aren't quite where they should be. But we have significant amounts of information that absolutely proves the argument that there isn't a pipeline problem. It's just that you're not looking properly. And it's not like we've gone out there and done a massive marketing campaign to get these organizations to speak to us. We just went out and said, hey, this is what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
We're actually interested in investing in people who look like you. You get into the room because you look the way you do. You don't get kicked out of it because you look the way you do. And that's been absolutely critical to our message and what we're doing. So is there a pipeline problem? Absolutely not. But there is an issue with funds and investors who just aren't looking in the right places or are not open to the conversation in the first place.
100%, 100%. And before I hand over to Ken, Piers, very quickly, what other problems do you see aside from the sort of pipeline myth or the sort of credibility issue? What other problems do you see from your perspective?
Well, firstly, you picked the wrong person to come to do anything quickly. I could sit and talk about this all night. So I mean, I can go through my whole life story, which I was Rich, very interesting what you did. Mine was complete chaos. I only raised the first money because I managed to scrape, a bit like the Hunger Games times exponentially as well, the power of N, to get into the city and be an investment banker. I only raised my first million because it was a dot-com boom and everybody had FOMO and thought some young investment banker would walk out, because most people then were young investment bankers or management consultants starting dot-coms, let's face it. I had a bonus, I could take a couple of years out. And they just thought, oh, let's throw some money at these guys. After that, it was very hard to raise any money. So I went down the road of actually raising money myself by making money. And that's how I really got started. And only then when I built my own businesses and bought into businesses and did some M&A and sold them, were then people back me. And even today, I mean, I've been on TV. I was the equivalent of Shark Tank in the US Dragon's Den here. And in a way that raised my profile. But in other ways, people then take you even less seriously, because you're now not only sort of this mixed race lad, you're actually one of these guys off telly. So I kind of, everything's been said, I've kind of experienced. I'm not going to repeat that. But I think what's important is that now, which is for the first time ever, rather than be anecdotal about it, there's great things like ImpactX that are building pipelines that's data driven, is now we've got the research. So whether it's Extend Ventures, who did some research that showed that in the UK, one Black woman has raised a Series A round of venture capital finance in the last decade, and they use computer vision and to actually analyze what's happened in the market. And British Business Bank, where I'm a non-exec director, we commissioned some research called the Alone Together report. And what that shows you is that, and we have this, if you know that in the UK, BAME, so Black, Asian, Minority, Ethnic Founders. And if you're Black Caribbean, which I'm from Barbados, it's extremely hard. If you're Black African, it's a little bit easier. If you're a woman, it's much harder. So if you're my mum, a Black Caribbean woman, you've got a serious problem. But what the research showed basically is that Black founders especially, they invest more money. They start as many businesses, first of all, proportionately. They invest more money in their new businesses. They invest more time and energy in their new businesses. I was quite surprised, perhaps so it's my bias, that they're actually better educated than the white counterpart founders. But for some reason, their outcomes are worse. Their outcomes in terms of success and their outcomes in terms of fulfilling their aspirations And I've got a funny feeling that their aspirations are not a 200-foot yacht instead of a 150-foot yacht. It's about providing for the family and being able to put the kids through a decent education. So I think there's an aspiration gap as well, I think. So I think what we've got now is research. So we're no longer just talking about what we think, we've got the data. And I think now there's no excuse now, given what was said at the beginning, actually, by yourself, Emma, that the research shows the data are absolutely appalling, and there's no excuse for it to stay that way, and we all need to do something about it.
Yeah, 100%. It's all about action now, isn't it? The data's there, all about action. So thank you. I'm going to hand over to Ken now. We've talked extensively about the challenges and the problems. Let's talk about the solutions. So Ken, over to you.
Thank you very much, Emma. And I see about eight how-to books that should be written about how to raise capital under circumstances that are less than ideal for Black and Brown founders, just on this panel alone. It's remarkable. You know, before I transition over to the solutions, I want to just echo Piers's point about the data. And if I could, for a moment, transport the panel over to the United States, where a lot of information has been gathered and data has been gathered on the very point that Piers was mentioning about the gap in terms of provision of capital to Black founders, and particularly Black women. There was a racial equity report that was issued by Citibank, which said that just 0.02% of venture capital went to Black women. And at the same time, you see that Black women are the fastest growing demographic of entrepreneurs in the US. So there is a serious disconnect in the ability to identify where the opportunities to invest are and the best opportunities are. And so, to Piers's point again, Black women founders are the most highly educated, and these numbers and the data shows this, and they're still succeeding. 40% of Black women business owners have noted over the past year that they have found themselves to have paying customers despite not getting seed funding that's typically provided to get initial customers. So what we're seeing, I think this is in the US. Piers mentioned, elaborated on what's happening in the UK. And I just feel the need to impress that as we are in Black History Month going into March, which is Women's History Month, that there is a tremendous amount of potential in Black women founders. And we need to make sure that we find structural solutions to direct increased investment in that direction. But I just want to underscore that important point that was raised by Piers. And now we can kind of turn toward what we think some of the solutions are. You know, from my standpoint as the executive director of a city government agency or an initiative that is really focused on a targeted solution to addressing the racial wealth gap, and in particular, helping to boost entrepreneurship in the Black community, I want to think about kind of the role of government in helping to solve some of these challenges that Black and Brown founders face across the globe. And Keisha's path, in particular, in how to raise $1 million was through a federal program, right? So I want to pitch this question to the panel, and if you could speak to it, please do. For all the other panelists, and Keisha, if you want to weigh in as well, please do. Have there been any government programs or policies that have been particularly helpful to you in your quest for capital? And if you could speak to that, what aspects of these programs did you find to be the most beneficial?
Well, I'm going to just pick up, since this is my wheelhouse. There is SBIR, which is government funded, started in 1982, but notoriously only 0.008% of Black women have been funded. Unfortunately, we can't break this problem until we get to the small business investment companies. We used to have, back in the 80s, the Minority Enterprise Small Business Investment Corporation, and that will focus in on the minority population that wasn't getting funded. But somehow it mysteriously went away, and that access to that kind of capital we don't have anymore.
So question of getting structures in place that are targeted. What you're speaking to is a targeted initiative focused on support for minority businesses. And as
Yeah, Kenneth, I'd like to touch on. I'm a big fan of the SEIS, EIS investing structures that we have in the UK. And from a tax break perspective, it's a phenomenal scheme that encourages early stage investing and risk capital. However, there are some serious caveats around it. You have to be a sophisticated investor or high net worth in order to participate under that scheme, which either means you have significant experience as an investor, you're part of a syndicate, or you've earned more than, I think it's £100,000 in the previous tax year. What that means is for people like myself, I grew up in Southeast London, both my parents were teachers, right? Or, a young black woman who's grown up in Stratford, whose family doesn't have that kind of access to capital. What it means is their friends and family rounds are severely limited, right, from their immediate networks. And why I bring this point up is that SEIS is so powerful as a risk capital method for getting early stage investment in. But those barriers to entry are crazy because those same people who cannot qualify to invest in the business of someone who they know, who they care about, and whose business they understand are free to go and buy as many lottery tickets as they like, right? Where there's something like a 14 million to 1 chance of winning the lottery, right? Your odds of being successful in the startup game are way higher than that. Yet they can blow their entire salary on lottery tickets, on gambling, on anything else, yet they are not allowed to invest in these businesses. So if I would like to see one policy change, it would be about increasing access to EIS and SEIS investing for various individuals.
That's a
Can I contribute to that? So the research I mentioned earlier, this is UK. Well, I think there's probably some similarity in the US as well. The big issues, there are two fundamental issues. So one is access to financial capital. I think we all understand. The other one is access to social capital. And the social capital is typically, inextricably linked with financial capital. Now, financial capital is very much the money. Social capital, as we all know, is networks, where you're from, socioeconomic background, what your parents did, education, and that makes a massive difference. So if we wait for social capital to pick up, that's going to be generations. I'm going to be long gone, and I want to see some change before then, ideally. Financial capital, you can synthesize that to some extent by the schemes like EAS, although it doesn't really sort of help you. The structural thing, I think, is that if you come from a lower income background, which is unfortunately, if you're from an ethnic minority background, the probability is you are on average come from a lower income background, so there's less money to put into those kind of schemes. And in the UK, so British Business Bank runs a scheme which is, it's not equity, it's a personal loan. It's called the Startup Loans Company, and this basically is quasi-equity because it's a government scheme. The private sector would never actually do this because the default rate is much higher than they could ever make any money out of. So the government provides loans up to £25,000 up to 4 founders. They then invest in the business. If their credit's not great, they can look at that in some detail and overcome it. They provide some support about a business plan. So, and I meet so many founders where I talk to them and say, how did you raise your first money? And it was actually the startup loan scheme. And there is this kind of old adage that it's a black woman's hairdresser or chicken shop. So you get a lot of people think that that's what it's about, and it's just nonsense. Actually, when you dig into it, the variety of businesses that have been started by underrepresented founders is immense. So in London, for example, the ethnic community is about 40%, I think, and the Startup Loans Company, the founders are 43% from ethnic minority background. So the ways you can maybe synthesize access to capital, and that basically replaces that family cash, that first access to those savings or that family and friends money, but it's very hard to do. Social capital is much more difficult. I think that's something we need to try, and whether it's communities, whether it's helping people understand their options. Some of it's actually confidence. British Business Bank research shows there's a reticence in the UK, much more than the US, to raise external finance, even for a startup company. I think the coronavirus, the pandemic has changed that. People have had to raise money. But I think one of the things we need to work out is how do we increase social capital? Because that will then flow into the access to financial capital in terms of ability, how you do it, where you look, the confidence, the connections, and being walked in to see investors rather than trying to find them on LinkedIn.
That's a phenomenal point, Piers. And I think if we have another panel at some point, I would love to explore the idea of government being a player in developing, cultivating social capital networks. Part of what we're trying to do at BNYC, but I would be fascinated in examples from around the world to try and address that issue in addition to the access to capital piece, which is, as you mentioned, so sorely needed. I think in terms of, we talked about beneficial government programs. Let's talk about the other side. Government, in many cases in high growth industries, including the financial services sector, can institute an inordinate amount of regulations, and it can create additional rounds of red tape, particularly for entrepreneurs trying to raise capital. So to the panel, as founders of color, can you tell us about any government programs and/or requirements that you have had to go through that you believe create more harm than good in terms of making that quest for capital that much more difficult?
Well, I mean, rather than talk about one that's been a bit of a struggle, I think I'll talk about one I think has been a fantastic success, and that is the FCA's regulatory sandbox. Right? If you're in the payment space, the fintech space, that is an incredibly hard area to build a startup in, right? Because the FCA needs to see that you've got your product, you've got your business plan, you've demonstrated it with clients. They're comfortable that the customers are going to be treated fairly and aren't going to lose their money. Now, as a startup, that's almost completely back to front with what you should be doing. And what the regulatory sandbox has done is created an environment where these innovative early stage companies can actually start to test their ideas without having to have the full backing of a fully funded startup. What I would love to see is something similar in the procurement space when trying to sell into businesses, because that's another significant challenge for early stage companies, without which what Piers alluded to was the social capital and the networks to make that easier. One of the biggest challenges as an investor, and I'm sure Rich can talk to this, is that one of the things we look for is traction. We want to see that you've been able to get clients over the line, you've had pilots and you've converted them. But if you weren't able to get those conversations going in the first place, it's almost impossible. And some of those big challenges with that procurement pipeline with some of these tier one organizations is a certain amount of cash in your bank, certain number of employees, certain amount of time that you've been running. And yet some organizations can't even set up a bank account. So how are you ever supposed to get past this? And it's actually been shown that during the pandemic, a lot of the big banks have dramatically curtailed their setting up of bank accounts for businesses. In fact, I think it's probably why Starling is doing so well at the moment. Now, apologies. I know Keisha has something to jump in with, so I'll shut up now.
Right. Thank you. As Keisha, please.
So the U.S. government has done a great job at creating small business investment companies, but the bad thing was regulating them. They tend to invest in companies that have EBITDAs of 5 million or more. For startups, that's inevitable. We're not going to have that. We need more SBICs that invest in small business that have less EBITDAs of less than 5 million. Startups need just SBICs that are doing syndicates with venture capital firms to kind of walk them into that area, saying we invested in them, we're walking you in, we know that they can do what they say they can do. So just change on regulations, get more notice to the people that are getting disadvantaged from the start.
Great point, Keisha. Great point. In the few minutes we have left, I want to dive into the next question, which I think, based on this panel and heard some tremendous wisdom from Rich speaking about the different challenges we faced and obstacles and having to weave around to obtain access. And everyone is speaking on some corner of this issue, but looking across the board, I think in terms of your collective experience, this is not just a number of individuals coincidentally having some challenges. And I think that's the concept behind what is fueling founder tribes as well. There are some key issues such as equitable access to capital, which we've spoken to, access to robust networks, which Piers alluded to, for contracting and funding purposes that appear to go beyond the individual experience and suggest a truly systemic issue. So what would you say are some of the most significant structural challenges that prevent more Black and Brown founders from being able to raise capital in this world?
I could say a point about UK, which hopefully will change. So I don't know, maybe Ez, you've got a view on this as well. But while we're in the EU, a lot of the money in the UK that went into regional funds, new businesses, government money, essentially was restricted from being positively couldn't sort of discriminate positively, really, in terms of where that money went. It was very hard to do that. So I think now we're not in the EU. It depends where there are some regulations that still apply in terms of sort of discrimination of the capital deployment. But hopefully the government here will look at this, and a lot of this may come from British Business Bank. I don't know yet. I'm not above my pay grade, but there's potential now actually to push money in particular in certain directions, and maybe that's something we need. A lot of the funds I've seen, and none of them on this call, luckily, where even angel funds where they've said we're going to invest in unrepresented founders, they've struggled to actually do that, and they haven't actually succeeded. So I'm hoping that we can actually see a positive. So British Business Bank is the biggest LP in the UK, and that's now looking at ways of actually this is now an issue. What do we do about it? And I think if the government decides it's going to do something about it, then you're looking at hundreds of millions of pounds flowing in different directions.
Excellent point, Piers. I often in these conversations we talk about some of the tremendous challenges, and I like to close on a more optimistic, hopeful note, and just kind of pose to the panel, anyone with any particularly strong thoughts before we close. Where do you see opportunities? What gives you hope about the state of venture capital and other sources of funding right now for Black and Brown founders? What are you most optimistic about in 2021 as a Black founder looking to raise capital? I will start with Rich, and if anyone has any other closing thoughts on that point, please do weigh in.
Yeah, so make it brief. Things are changing rapidly for the positive. When Piers was growing up, there was no people that looked like him, even entrepreneurs. When Ez was growing up, he had entrepreneurs like Piers, but he had no investors that he could go to. Me now, I have investors I can go to who are Black, like Ez. And so things are changing massively. The other thing, as a YC founder, we've actually now come together, all the Black entrepreneurs as a critical mass who are actually helping other people, whether you're an entrepreneur in the US or in Europe, to get into Y Combinator. One thing that's less obvious now is that the actual president of Y Combinator, Michael Seibel, the co-founder of Twitch TV, he proactively is working to support to get more Black entrepreneurs. So if you are looking to become a tech entrepreneur, reach out to any Black founder who's been to YC, and we will be there for you and support you in putting together your application. On the flip side, Black people, we are culture, and we should never forget that. And the fact that e-commerce now is what dominates the world, we have a massive opportunity to create businesses that don't actually require external capital. And you can use organizations like ours, Business School, to support you on your journey if you are creating a D2C brand.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. And if we could close with Precious, comments on that point. What makes you hopeful, and what makes you look to the future with bright eyes?
Yeah, I think the democratization and access to the internet. So, funding through CIDRs, crowdfunding. As Black people, we can also put money where we think it should be put, right? And ultimately, for VCs, for financiers, it's about results, which is what it catches. It's about what's the outcome. So if Black businesses that are doing well, we're able to publicize that, money will flow where the money is. And I think we doing more of that will actually create more of an ecosystem. I do feel that we're having momentum now. The fact that we can all be here because we've raised more than $1 million means something, right? Because 5 years ago, I think it would have been a much smaller panel. So I feel optimistic that as we go forth, there will be more opportunities because people will see that this is where the growth is, and you will get your return on your investment.
Thank you so much, Precious. And I should say we are a little bit over now. I just want to say it has been a tremendous pleasure and honor to speak on this particular panel of amazing stars. And I feel very optimistic as someone who is an entrepreneur in government, that what we are doing at BNYC, what Gary is doing with Founder Tribes, what each and every one of you is doing with your respective ventures is going to catch fire. We have potential, we have opportunity, and I am excited about the fact that we have connectivity as demonstrated in this panel. Look forward to continuing the conversation, collaboration, and building something great with all of you. And I will, with that, hand it over to Madam Moderator to close. Emma.
Just unmuting my mic. No, thank you so much to everyone, to all the panelists, to Ken, to everyone for sharing in a very engaging and really important conversation. I think it was very honest, it was very transparent and very insightful. And I think we're going to now continue that convo on Clubhouse, right? Is that right, Gary?
Yep.
Fantastic. So yeah, thank you everyone, and see you on that event link now on Clubhouse.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Mm.